Welcome to Petrichor on the Rocks. I'm Mason. Today we're going to be breaking down the very beginning of the Bible, Genesis 1, and in this profound text we're going to find that it teaches us how to read the entire rest of the Bible. It's also the first proof in the Bible of why you should care about the Bible at all. It's a very dense text, and so to mine out all the details, I'm going to be using the three-sphere breakdown method. If you want to know how this method works in detail, then please pause here and watch my other video, How to Read a Book, The Three Spheres Explained. Without it, some of what I say here may seem hard to follow. But for the sake of those who don't want to watch the video, I'll go over the three spheres briefly here. The three spheres are the high, mid, and low spheres. The high is what you don't know, the low is what you do know, and the mid is what is personally relevant. When approaching the text from each of these spheres, you do so with the high by presuming nothing and accepting the text as it is. With the low sphere, you compare it to what you already know, and with the mid-sphere, you read it as though it were made for you and about you personally. Before we begin, we'll need to choose which of the three spheres to begin with. We'll start with the high sphere and parse it into the mid-sphere. Once we have that in place, we will be able to compare the low sphere to what we got from the high and the mid-sphere. But for the sake of time, I'll have to do that in a separate Part 2 video. With that said, let's jump in right at the start. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now immediately, people will want to jump into the low sphere and say that this was the start of all time. But hold on, we're not in the low sphere. Toss that out because it's going to get in the way of the sphere we are in, which is the high sphere with a mind to move into the mid-sphere. Keep in mind that the mid-sphere is all about personal relevance. Thinking in low sphere terms, were you around for these events? Of course not. It depends on who you ask, but most everyone agrees that this all occurred a really long time ago. Long before you were born, that's for sure. So how much does that matter to you now? When you wake up in the morning, do you think, before I get out of bed, I better determine exactly how the cosmos was formed in the void of space, or else I simply can't have breakfast and start my day? No, you're going to get up and go about your day exactly the same, regardless of how everything came into existence, because the only proof you need is that it somehow did end up like it is right here now. That's all you need to go about your business. So again, let's stay focused on how, from the mid-sphere, this story is about you. To begin again, it says, in the beginning. The beginning of what? Well, you, of course. When did you begin? That's not hard. You began so many years ago when you were conceived. So this is the story of that, obviously. God created the heavens and the earth. Who is this God fellow? It's hard to say, but you know you're not God. No, God is the name of the source of the stuff around you. What stuff? Well, there's only really two things around you, the heavens and the earth, which is the stuff above you and the stuff below you. You've always been aware of that. The heavens and the earth, there has always been an up and a down. You've never not been laying, sitting, or walking on something below you. Without it, you'd call that falling and can quickly lead to death. You need stuff below you in order to live. It's your foundation, and you've certainly always been able to look up and notice something up there out of reach. But you didn't make the stuff you stand on, and you didn't make the stuff above you. So it must have come from somewhere. We'll call that vague source of things God. It's as good a name as any, I suppose. So we get our first definitions from this. God is mid-sphere defined as the vague source of the stuff that keeps entering your perception. The heavens are defined as stuff above you that's out of reach, and earth is defined as a place you can live. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. Well, yeah, that's certainly how it started. You don't recall much about anything back when your world was starting. You just kind of popped into awareness one day, but everything before that, who knows? You weren't there for it. Everything was indeed void. Think as hard as you want, you're only drawing a blank when you try to think about before you were born. It's all dark in your mind. And what about the face of the deep? There was water there? Well, yeah. The earth was the stuff below you. You can stand on that. You know where you can stand now. And the water is like the earth, except you can't stand there. You'd sink, and if you stay in the water too long, you'd drown. Water is just a place you can't stand and can't live. And before you were born, there was indeed no place to stand and no living going on. It was all like water. and you were indeed dead in it. Although dead isn't a very good term for it. Dead implies alive first. It was more that you were like dead people. You were unalive as of yet. So yeah, you were floating, lost in an ocean of nothing. This gets us more definitions. Water is defined as a place you don't know how to live. Staying there too long means death. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. We've already established that God just means the source of everything that isn't you. So of course, this God figure is going to have to be there in those waters of nothing. You certainly don't recall creating yourself, so the thing that made the stuff around you that you didn't make must have been there, aware of the void that you weren't aware of. It's the only thing that makes sense, because again, you know you didn't do it. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. Well, that certainly happened. It's hard to remember the specifics, but there's no doubt that one day you just kind of started perceiving. You weren't in the void anymore. You were aware. It probably didn't start with your eyes, not that you can remember exactly. It's more like it started with the edges of you. You didn't know what fingers were, but you did know that you can make things move out on the edge of your perception. You had the ability to tell that you were made of you. In this way, the world lit up. Your nerves fired and they slammed perceptions into your brain. You were alive. The world wasn't formless and dark anymore. There was light. That certainly happened to you. And then the source of everything that you didn't do saw that it was good? Well, of course it did. It did it, and then it left it. If it was bad, it would have taken it away, obviously. So it must have been there for some good reason or another. Not that you knew at the time. So we get the definition of light, which is what you can perceive. And God separated the light from the darkness. Yep, that's what happened. It didn't take long after noticing your perception that it came with it the accompanying limits of your perception. You could feel the limits of your body, but you couldn't feel any farther no matter how hard you tried. You got hints about the outside limits, though. Changes happened at the limits of you. Changes you didn't do. You could flex your body and feel it, but you could also sometimes feel stuff suddenly come in from outside of your body, entering your perception uncaused by you. If the light was what you could perceive, then darkness was what you couldn't perceive. So that's true. Darkness is defined as what you can't perceive. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. So if light is what you perceive and darkness is what you don't perceive, then that's what a day is. A time period split between you perceiving and you unable to perceive. Naturally, that means there is also a transition period between them. The evening is when perception fades into imperception, and morning is when imperception is driven out by your growing perception. Now you know what a day is. It's just a period where you maintain perception, which is always sandwiched between two instances of everything going dark and perception fading. Which means everything we just talked about all happened in one go. You woke up out of no perception, noticed you were perceiving, noticed there were limits to your perception, and then got tired and went to sleep again. A hard day's work if ever there was one. But that did happen. There was a first time for your perception to awaken. There was a first time where you noticed your perception was limited. It's hard to recall exactly when it occurred, but it did occur. Might have been when you were still floating in the womb. That would explain all the references to waters, seeing as how it was pretty wet in there. Just a bundle of cells until something pulsed and all of a sudden your brain turned on, actually aware in the true sense of the word. That was the first day. So we get the definition of day, which is a period of perception sandwiched between two periods of imperception. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And then there was evening and there was morning, the second day. This too clearly happened. The darkness around you, which was everything that wasn't you, didn't stay still. It changed around you. It split apart. You came out of the womb, and there was a distinct directionality to the world. There was always something below you that held you there, and there was always something going on up above. You didn't have words for them at the time, but now you would surely recognize them. The things that held you from below were likely the hands of a doctor, your mother's arms, and soft blankets. The things going on above you were probably lights, people moving, and the sounds of a hospital. But hold on. In the first day, the source of everything called the light good. But not today, huh? Well, of course not. Water is a place you can't live. You found yourself surrounded, above and below, by unlivable places. As you lay there in the blankets as a baby, if nothing happened around you, then that's where you would die. You can't help yourself. You didn't even have the understanding to help yourself. What should you grab to save your own life? You had no idea. It was all chaos. It was water above and water below. The only thing keeping you alive was seemingly random help that appeared from the outside from time to time. Of course this place wasn't good. It's nothing but death all around you. You couldn't stay like that forever. And so this is the only day of the 7 days of creation that God does not call good. So another day passed, another period of your perception of these things growing clearer in the light, only to become well established. Once they are known, they sink into being automatically assumed and expected. No need to focus on them anymore, and so they sink into evening as your attention turns to something else. Once you identify a problem, you don't keep trying to identify it. You move on to trying to find a solution. Let the path behind you remain in darkness of the past, for your light of focus must shine forward into what has not yet been traveled. Dawn ever breaking in front of you, and evening ever setting behind you. Your memory filling up with that which is below you in the earth, and therefore dark to your perception, because you are looking above and into that which is as yet unknown. From this, we get the definitions of the waters above, which is unreachable and unlivable, and the waters below, which are things that are reachable but unlivable. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw that it was good. The immaturity of being a helpless baby didn't last. Quickly, you started to notice the world around you wasn't random. If you found yourself in great suffering, such as the intolerable torture of having a hungry belly, you could scream, and nourishment would be brought to you rapidly. That new ability to affect the world meant that you had power. No longer did you just experience. Now you could express. You had something to stand on, an understanding of the world, and an ability to change it. You knew that by gripping your fingers you could hold an object, and by squeezing your lungs you could make a sound. But action worked only for things that you understood, only things that were within your ability, the things that were below you. If you wanted something, you could reach for it. Thus the dry land on which you could act was revealed to you slowly. It wasn't just the chaotic waters anymore. However, there were still limits. Not everything was within your reach. There were still some things that no amount of effort would gain you. And so while there was solid ground below you now, there was still some things which you simply couldn't figure out, which was the sea. You couldn't live there regardless of effort. And it's important to note that that which is above you was still in the unlivable waters of chaos, because the waters above were not yet split. If something came down to you from above, then it was great, but you still had no idea how or why it occurred. From this we get the definition of earth, which is a place you can live, and seas, which are places you can reach but not live. This is the distinction you began to make as you noticed that the world was full of either things you could do something about or things that you couldn't do anything at all about. And if you focused on them too long, all you would find was that you were wasting your time, and thus you can't live there. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. This too occurred because now that you're able to express your will into action and thus gained a place to not just exist but to live in the world, you began to notice something. You weren't alone there on the earth upon which you could act. There were two types of interaction you could engage in. First was simple, cold, dead earth. When you grabbed a toy, it remained in your hand. When you dropped it onto the ground, it stayed there until you once again grabbed it. Consistent, predictable, and unmoving without you having moved it. But the second was that there were things in the world around you which didn't stay still. They moved on their own without you being involved at all. If you reached out and grabbed what you would later come to know as a finger, then that finger would not stay still. It would move in your grip and sometimes even struggle and split from your grasp. And when you reached out and felt the softness of what you would come to call fur, it would react to the touch. You noticed these forms moving in and out of your perception, and worse, sometimes they could compete with you. You might want a toy very badly, and yet one of these entities might take that toy and disappear with it, leaving you without. Thus you competed for standing in this new dry land with these things that were there. These were plants. Why? Because they were like you. You have seen the light of perception, and you have seen the above and below in relation to you. But these plants weren't you, and yet they interacted with the above and the below. That's what plants are. The stitches of the above and the below. Their branches reach up to the sky, grasping for more of what comes down to them unbidden, and their roots sink deeply into the earth to find solid ground and treasures that reside down there for the taking. They are like you, except that you can't see their light. They do things which you can't understand. They act from a motivation you simply do not feel. Thus plants are beings who are like you, but are not you. Strangers, foreign wills, competition, points of meeting between the heavens and the earth, just like you. And they bear seeds, not random seeds either. No, the seeds they bear are after themselves. As you watch these entities, you begin to see the patterns. A plant can be known by that which it repeatedly does. That's what makes them distinct in your mind and gives away that these are not one and the same expressions of a larger world, but rather different entities moving at different times. That's what makes them distinct in your mind and gives away that these are not all one and the same expressions of a larger monolithic world moving, but rather different entities moving at different times. One plant always smells nice when it appears. It has features that are fetching. It is gentle and makes soft, pleasant sounds to your ears. In time, you would know it as mother. Another plant is not so gentle. The sound it makes are disturbing and baritone, and yet the intimidating presence of that plant brings with it some excitement as it pokes and teases as though it wants you to respond in kind, as though it's trying to teach you something. In time, you will know it as father. And then there are these smaller plants, both covered in softness. One always tries to steal toys from your hands and makes a barking sound. The other one is much smaller, quieter, and vibrates in an odd purring fashion when touched. But each one of these is known by what it leaves of itself. These are the seeds and the fruits. You slowly notice that if the dog lays in your bed, it leaves the hair and scent of the dog. You hear the heavy footsteps down the hall, and you know that it is produced as the seeds of father, because mother's steps sound lighter than that. And not just seeds, but fruits, wondrous fruits. Mother is the most fruitful of all. From her comes food, delicious, wonderful sustenance to quell the rumblings of the tummy. Oh, what a great plant she is. Your favorite plant, by far. How lucky that from this plant comes such fruits. Why does fruit come from her? Who knows? The father plant is fun to play with, and the little furry plants are nice and warm to snuggle at night, but it is the mother plant that has the best fruit, though you have no idea why any of them produce the fruits they do. All you know is that you can deal with them. If you scream, the mother tree produces the fruit of food much faster. If you are gentle to the furry plants, they will stay and let you pet on them, but if you pull on their softness too hard, they will leave. So finding the right action to get the right reaction becomes increasingly important to learn. So you pay attention to the seeds, which are each points of data, and you learn that there is always a pattern going on. That's information, and that means you can deal with the data once you know it. So once again, the evening and the morning passes on this day as you witnessed these things until you had mastered them. But once mastered, they become automatic and slip into the background, your attention turning to something new. From this we get several definitions. A plant is a person who is a stranger to you. A seed is a pattern repeated from another will. And a fruit is a repeated pattern that brings you pleasure. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the great light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. It seems that source of everything around you is still at work, the one we call God. Just like how the unlivable waters below you gave way to dry land where you can actually stand and express your will, soon after, unlivable spaces in the waters above you became increasingly ordered. This is because of the seeds from before. They showed you consistency, and because of this, you started to notice that consistency leads up to the sky. There above you, you finally noticed the future. That patterns begetting patterns give you the ability to see progression beyond where you are right now. You might be stuck here on the solid ground, and the sky above certainly isn't reachable, but it might be soon. You make a map of future patterns. The mother tree always feeds you at the same time each day. Because of this, you begin to expect it. Knowing it's coming makes you desire for it. You plan for it, and thus it hangs up above you in the heavens as a bright beacon of what is to come. That goal, your main focus. But what can you do as a small baby? What action can you take that will make the mother tree get here now instead of later? You simply don't know. Thus the light above you is the moon. It is indeed a bright light, but it's in the dark. You can't see how to get to that goal. All you can do is search for some way to reach that goal up above and get to the moon. You cried, "Food, glorious food, O mother tree, hasten thy approach, and in my suffering hunger, this I pray." Although, as a baby, it probably didn't come out quite so well articulated, more of the crying scream of an infant. However, given time, you grew and found yourself less helpless, the ability to crawl. No longer did you need to howl at the moon when you were hungry. The guiding light was no longer surrounded by darkness, but rather burned bright as the all-consuming light, a directive, a path. Find the mother tree and get food from her. That is the sun. It shares the sky with nothing, because once you see the path, there is no time to think. You must do. You go blind to all else because action requires your full focus, and so you crawl ever forward to find the tree you seek and obtain its sweet fruits. But if you lose focus and your sky dims, you become aware that your current goal doesn't have to be your main goal. As you move, you notice stars, alternative points of light, each one a distant beacon like the sun. As you crawl, you pass a toy and get a glint of a possible alternative sun in the form of playing with that toy. You pass the dog and there's another glint of desire because you kind of want to pet the dog. Each glint offering a new focus should you so choose. Each one of these glints is a star, only able to be seen when the path to your current goal becomes darkened. But if you don't lose focus, then the sun remains dominant in the sky, and so you can keep moving towards that future goal. And because you anticipate these things you desire in the unreachable future, they become guiding lights in the sky, which tells you what to focus on. With the coming of these anticipated patterns, you begin to perceive time. the progression of event after event, repeating noticeably around you. After all, the light was your focus, and the dark was your lack of focus. Thus the lights are that which begins to govern your limited attention, and so you conform to these patterns because it lets you deal with the world in ways that better attain your goals. Many little days pass in this way, the bright sun of desire for food, but as you get food, that sun goes down and the moon comes up. Your vague desire pondered among the stars as you search the darkness, and so you pick the next goal and decide to play with your toys. A new sun rises, a new day of focus as you go to the toy box and open it, but the sun sets again. Which toys should you pick? Ah, the darkness of indecision. The moon is there. You surely want one of these toys, but which? So many stars to pick from, until you finally notice the ball. Of course, the ball. The burning sun rises again, and you grab the ball with confidence. In the sky, the sun shines again. On and on go the days. But all of those days share a pattern, and so as you look back, you see that this time where you began to see patterns of the world was itself a day of its own, and so that day ended, the fourth day. This gives us more definitions. The lights in the heavens are things you anticipate in the future. The sun is the main focus you see the path to, the moon is a main focus you don't see the path to, and the stars are things that could be your main focus instead. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures, and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. This outlines something very interesting that started to happen once you began to deal with the future. In your future, you saw yourself. But it wasn't you. It was a you that didn't exist yet. It was like watching an empty version of yourself. You could see how you would act in that future, but you weren't actually there yet. You were watching a hollow mimicry of yourself. You quickly noticed that, just like how you could judge the patterns of the world around you, so too could you judge your own future self and watch what the patterns of your choices, as yet unmade, would result in. Each time you did, it was like placing a program into your own mind and then stopping to watch that programmed version of yourself act into the future. A simulation of things to come now that you can see the future that exists in the heavens. And what were you putting in that simulation of your future potential self? You were following urges. Urges are like animals. When you feel the pull to do something, it always resembles something you have seen in an animal around you. This is why there are animals in the stars above, in constellations, because your future map contains the urges you are tempted towards, and those follow the patterns of an animal. You can see the clear map of animals to urges. Animals act out certain patterns in their simple lives, and that pattern mimics a part of human life that you've seen before. Bulls map to strength, but stubbornness. Pigs map to gluttony, but prosperity. Dogs map to loyalty, but naive obedience. But of course at this point you were still formative. Thus, the urges you first notice would lead you down certain paths if followed were not those of solid earth where you were, but rather were the animals that lived in the places you couldn't live. These are the unknown places, the heavens above and the waters below. The heavens are that which is out of your reach. Nothing you can do can get you there right now, but you hope that if the world works out in your favor, you might one day see that which is too high come down within your reach. So whenever you have an urge which tempts you to seek after something you know you can't reach, it is an urge which goes up. It flies above you as an image of yourself there. It becomes a wish and a dream. You visualize yourself in that future place. Those are the birds and the flying things. Back then, they were all you had. You didn't know anything, and so seemingly random and out of touch wishes were everything. Pure, childlike wonder, each one according to its kind. You see a man on a horse with a gun and a hat on TV, and you begin to learn that the kind is called a cowboy. There was no hope for you to become a cowboy, but it was a wonderful dream. Did you know what a cowboy really was? Of course not. It was mostly some strong guy who did cool things on the TV. Why he did them was vague at best in your understanding, and so you did all you could to mimic that bird you saw flying above, up there with that star. That's why they called them movie stars, after all. You even went to Mother Tree to see if she had any good fruit, and wouldn't you know it, good old Mother Tree gave you a toy pop gun and a plastic cowboy hat. And the waters below are that which you don't know how to live in. When an urge tugs you down that way, things get scary. Could you enter the waters? Sure, for a little while. Unlike the heavens above, the waters below are pretty easy to enter. But when you do, it doesn't feel good. You can't live there. So the only reason you'd enter those unlivable, unsustainable places is if there was something of value down there in the deep. But it turns out there is often treasure in the dangerous places, such as the cookie jar in the kitchen. Such a sweet treat waits for you there. But there is danger in trying to sneak and get one. You know that if you get caught, Mother Tree's sweet fruits can quickly sour into the grapes of wrath, so you're entering some dark waters when you take that risk. And so these urges, not unlike birds that take you up, are fish which lead you down. One of your first memories of entering the waters below, following after a fish, was learning to ride a bike. But it wasn't just a simple fish, it was a big fish. In fact, it was a scary fish, a sea monster, something to be struggled with mightily, and with a well-known danger that you might get hurt doing it. But once you caught and tamed that sea monster, then you could ride it safely and see where it takes you. Indeed, some people impress others with the sea monsters they have tamed, such as at a BMX bike rally where a man goes down a ramp on a bike and launches dangerously high into the air only to stick the landing. An impressive display of sea monster taming indeed. And so that was the fifth day, a period consisting of chasing birds and never catching them, and chasing fish and usually regretting it. And so we get more definitions. In the midsphere, animals are urges, birds are unreachable urges, and fish are urges that lead to danger. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good." And so this happened. The source of everything that you aren't doing moved things around you yet again. Your chasing of birds and fish changed. Once you caught a fish, you brought it onto the dry land. Once a bird came down into your reach, you had it on the land. The earth, where you could act and express yourself fully, started to have animals on it. These land animals were urges which didn't pull you off the stable land. They were urges you could handle. If you were hungry, you knew how to go and get food. If you wanted to make the dog play with you, you knew how to shake a stick and make the playful sounds. You were confident. You were succeeding in what you attempted. You were growing older. And notice that there are 3 types of urges here with you in these livable spaces that are within your reach. The creeping things, the livestock, and the wild beasts. The creeping things are your base urges, the urges that come naturally and simply. Thus, they are close to the earth below and well established. They come with a bit of shame for having done them, and so are rather gross to have to deal with, which comes with them a reason for you to hide these urges when possible. Bodily functions, addictions, fear, jealousy, greed, and other such urges all creep here. These are the low creeping things, each represented by an animal that acts in a lowly, hiding, skulking, creeping kind of way that is generally displeasing to witness. The livestock are the urges you have under control. You can deal with them in a mutual way, and they are virtually always helpful and good. These are the animals that, if you keep them alive, they will produce something for you that you want. Examples are loyalty, obedience, ritual, trust, comfort, conformity, and others. These urges tend to be low risk, but also low and constant reward. These are the animals generally considered tame, trustworthy, and pleasant to be around. These animals include all the tamed beasts, livestock, poultry, dogs, cats, any animal that you'd feel comfortable being around because it's supposed to be on your side. The wild beasts are the urges you don't have under control. When dealing with them, there's always a high risk, but also sometimes a high reward. The beasts found here can't be content in captivity, and crave for limits to be pushed beyond that which is comfortable and easy. These urges are overly bold and often go against your better judgment. These urges include pride, ambition, revenge, cruelty, anger, and gamble. Animals that mimic these types of urges are things like lions, wolves, bears, deer, and anything you'd find out in the wilds that you couldn't trust because it certainly wouldn't trust you. And so you observe the things you desired fall into these three categories: the ones you were ashamed of, the ones you relied on, and the ones that were risky. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. This you saw as your mastery over the things around you began to reveal something. It was hidden in the trees at first, but over time it became undeniable. The source of everything you weren't doing changed the trees in your sight. They weren't strangers. They weren't sources of fruit and seed. They weren't animals. No, they began to form into something unique. They were reflections of you. You had the perception of light, and you began to notice it in them. They weren't objects in the world. They were real people. The source of the world had made real people in your sight, and now it was somehow coaxing you into seeing them as people. They were made in our image. Your image, their image, the image of the source of all things that you didn't create, reflecting each other's souls, real, true humanity, another person. Oh, but the bitterness. Another person, another will, that's just great. That's the last thing you needed around here. Your own will was hard enough to satisfy, but now you have to care about some other will? You liked it better when Mother Tree was just a tree. She gave to you, and that was it. The deal ended there. But the thought occurred to you. Maybe she would want some fruit, too. That might please her. But wait, if you're giving her fruit, that makes you the tree now. How horrifying. Doing that means you'd lose some of your fruit. Who could bear such a cost? But even still, it would make her so happy. Mother Tree was so giving to you for so long. How could you deny her a bit of fruit? It would please her tender soul. So you did. You didn't have many animals at your disposal to make it happen, but even so, you tried. A Mother's Day card, shoddy work, confused writing, too much glue, but when Mother received it, she was over the moon. She must have attained a star because her delight was immeasurable. You had acknowledged her image. That her image was the image of you. You had made her in your image, stripped away her leaves and bark, and found the human being inside. Her delight delighted you. Two souls meeting for the first time, and real love warming both hearts. And God saw that it was good. God and you conspired to create that being in your perception, because God showed it to you with hints of humanity, but you chose to treat that person not like an object in the world, but like a real, true person you care about just as much as you care about yourself. This was just the beginning, of course. You began to notice that all plants worked like this. If you ignored them, they remained plants, strangers unknown and uncared for. But if you chose to give them some of your time and energy, you could create them in your image, with the help of the source of all things, of course. And you noticed patterns within these images. Some were male and others female. All had their own will, but expressed that will in different ways. But those that held the opposite pattern of gender to you were more intriguing, and were able to do things that you and your type weren't. A strange interplay of strengths and weaknesses, each of which seemed to balance the other. And God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. You saw this come to pass. All the things out of reach above, and reachable through great risk below, were reachable because of the plants around you, the strangers who produced and who brought things you couldn't do to your reach. They taught you the patterns of seeds and showed you how to make fruits of your own, how they could plant the seeds of how to catch a fish and lure a bird into your mind, and you could produce from it that same fruit. And the more the seeds of the plants were intershared among the people, the faster this process occurred, and more was built, learned, and subdued. Everything brought from above and below to be integrated onto the land where humanity can stand. Not just those you see with the image of God, but every stranger who is a plant. Strangers can work together in this way, and this unity of purpose must extend to the whole of the world. These fruits feed every known beast, and unobtainable birds get their nourishment from this process of human beings caring for human beings. Great works done for the sake of others, and others in turn producing great works. The animals helped because when you saw an animal you had tamed inside of another person, then you both could bond over mutually shared interests. Urges that intermingled and cooperated for a shared goal. This helped you see yourself even more clearly, smoothing the image-making process. The birds helped because when you shared a dream with another human being, you could both join hands in pursuit of that dream, because birds unreachable by you fall easily into the hand when feet stand on shoulders. The fish helped because when you shared a desire for treasure below with other people, they could join you in that risk, and the sea monster untouchable by you could become mere fish in the nets of you and your siblings. And God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. And you did behold that it was all around you, everything created for this unifying purpose, all of which you have seen played out since the very moment of your birth, not random and not staying still, but moving forward into the future, forward into the dreams above, the wings of angels like those of birds because they are up with our dreams. Wishes made upon stars because that is the focus we should have. You beheld that it was good. You entered the world, striving and trying and working, because you knew it was not good to stay still, not when the sky is so full of birds. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all of his work that he had done in creation. Look around you now. The source of all things has gone quiet since those years of your youth. All you do now consists of the patterns outlined above, a repeat of those days over and over again. God is resting, leaving you to your good work, to tame the untamed and risk the unrisked, to make yourself a tree and offer the fruit of your labor to the abundant plants all around you, to create men in your image anywhere you go by caring about them. That is where you find yourself now. And so you see the categories of the things around you. Above you, you have the sun, the moon, the stars, and birds. Below you, you have the water, the earth, and fish. Genesis 1 is the first proof of the Bible, because it was always about you. It knows you even better than you know yourself, and it knows your purpose better than you do. It reminds you that God has rested so that you might be awake. It outlines the patterns of your life so that you might use them as a structure with which to go on to read the rest of the Bible. After all, if it knows you this well already just from one chapter, then what else might it know? And that's Genesis 1 broken down from the high sphere into the mid sphere. The next step would be to break it down even further into the low sphere being our current understanding. This means basically science, and so we will take the low sphere, the current scientific understanding, and then try to match it up with Genesis 1, going through the entire story again. But for the sake of time, I'll make that a part 2 video. That'll shortly follow up this video, so stay tuned. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and as always, thanks for watching, and God bless.